Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here, and it's that time of the year. With 2021 fast approaching, it's time to take a look into the future and see who the top 10 upcoming servants are for next year. Now because NA is 2 years behind JP, we have insight into exactly who's coming up and who you should be investing in with your quartz. Now this top 10 list is going to be purely based on gameplay and who's going to be the cream of the crop next year. I won't be counting any of the free-to-play servants like the event welfares or the bronze and silver servants because there are just too many of those and they deserve their own separate video. So we're only taking a look at the premium 4-star and 5-star servants, but even with that restriction, there are so many amazing servants coming out next year that this has been the toughest list video that I've ever had to make. So without further ado, let's start with number 10. Topping off our list, we have Summer Melt, the 4-star Lancer, who's going to be releasing with Summer 4 in August 2021. Summer Melt is an AoE art servant who's built for farming, and that's going to be a theme that you're going to see a lot of on this list, because there are just so many strong arts farmers coming out next year. But what makes Melt in particular so special is her consistent arts looping capability. Thanks to the high hit counts on her NP and her monstrous 60% NP charge battery, Lancer Melt has absolutely no problem with looping her Noble Phantasm 2 or even 3 times to make short work of enemy waves. To make matters even better for herself, she has a permanent arts buff. That's right, one of her skills is an arts buff that has an uptime that's longer than its cooldown, so it can actually stack with itself. Between her permanent arts buff and great NP gain, it's super easy to build a very strong arts team around Lancer Melt. But one other strong trait that she has that's not really common in many servants is that she has the ability to set up a waterside battlefield for 3 turns, which means that she can actually activate many other servants' effects, like for example Nero and Summer Martha. Just about the only drawbacks that Summer Melt has is that she is a bit dependent on stealing NP charge from her allies in order to make her 60% battery work. And she also has some low NP damage numbers, which can make farming stronger enemy waves a lot more difficult at lower NP levels. So if you want to use her most effectively, you're going to want to get her to at least NP 2. Still though, if you're in the mood for an excellent arts farmer and you don't want to spend too much on a 5-star, Summer Melt is the way to go. And next up at number 9, we have another art servant in the 4-star ruler Luvia. She's going to appear in the Case Files collaboration event, which should be dropping in April 2021. However, unlike Summer Melt, Luvia is all about that single target burst damage. She has insanely high burst damage capability due to her powerful Noble Phantasm, which actually has recently received a buff through an interlude in JP. And the reason why Luvia is so strong is because her kit is chock full of damage buffs, and she has an anti-evil buff built into her Noble Phantasm. And for those of you who've seen my Beni-enma spotlight, you'll know that there's a lot of evil servants in the game, which gives Luvia a good amount of damage against most enemy bosses. But even aside from her strong Noble Phantasm, Luvia's kit features a ton of crit buffs and star generating. She's self-sufficient enough to produce her own stars and generate her own crits, which makes her an excellent choice if you're in the market for a crit DPS. But to make matters even better, she also has some incredible NP gain due to the high hit counts on her arts card, as well as an NP gain buff, an arts buff, and an NP charge, so she's easily able to spam her broken Noble Phantasm. Simply put, Luvia is an offensive powerhouse that easily overshadows most other 4-star servants and even some 5-stars. She does suffer from lack of class advantage though due to her ruler class, and she can feel a bit fragile since she doesn't have any hard defense despite her class, which makes her feel a bit like a glass cannon similar to Martha Ruler. But if you're someone who wasn't able to get Martha Ruler and you want to build a crit DPS or a boss killer, then Luvia is someone you should definitely go after. And coming in at number 8, we have yet another summer servant with the 5-star Berserker Musashi. She'll be releasing in August for the Summer 4 event. And just like with Melt, Musashi is one of the best AoE arts farmers in the game. Thanks to the high hit counts on her Noble Phantasm and her powerful 50% NP gain buff, Berserker Musashi is easily able to loop her Noble Phantasm and farm multiple enemy waves. This is especially the case once we get Castoria for Anniversary 5, as Castoria and Musashi have some of the best synergy around. But that aside, much like with Zerker-Lot, being a Berserker really helps out Musashi's flexibility when it comes to farming, because it allows her to farm nearly any enemy wave thanks to her class advantage. So she doesn't have to worry nearly as much about not having enough damage to clear enemy waves the way that Melt does. On the downside though, Musashi's attack buff does deal 5,000 damage to herself, which makes her feel even more fragile than your typical Berserker. So she's absolutely not viable for anything outside of a quick 3-turn farming strategy, as leaving her in any kind of prolonged battle will get her killed quickly. She's also somewhat dependent on Castoria to reach her full potential, which means if you do get her next year, you may have to wait a year before you can truly see what she's capable of. And you knew she'd be on this list somewhere. Coming in at number 7, we have Beni-enma, the New Year's Servant. Now, I already have a full servant spotlight out for Beni-enma, so if you want a more detailed look, I'll leave that in the description down below so you can get a better picture. But suffice it to say, Beni-enma is one of the most well-rounded servants in the game. She can function extremely well as a support and as a DPS. She has excellent support buffs and debuffs, including an NP charge for the whole party, a charisma, and an AoE NP seal, which makes her extremely good in challenge quests. She also has some of the strongest burst damage around thanks to her Noble Phantasm, which deals a ton of additional damage to enemies who have a chaotic or evil alignment, which is basically 2/3 of the servants in the game. So if you're looking for a servant who can kind of do it all and play any role, whether that be a boss killer or a support, Beni-enma is an excellent choice. Just keep in mind that she does deal fairly low damage against enemies who aren't chaotic or evil, and her cooldowns can be a bit longer than average. Still though, she's an excellent pickup if you're in the market for a saber, especially if you don't already have Nero Bride. Moving on to number 6, we have our 4th anniversary servant, Da Vinci Lily, who will be dropping in July. And wouldn't you have guessed it, she's an AoE art servant who excels at farming. Like I said, it's a consistent theme for the year. But don't confuse her for any old AoE arts farmer. What makes Da Vinci Lily so good is that she is extraordinarily consistent, even without Castoria. She not only has high hit counts on her Noble Phantasm, but she also has a skill that charges her NP gauge by 20% every turn. So looping with her is exceedingly easy without any kind of support. But another thing that really sets her aside from other arts farmers like Musashi and Melt is that she's also able to support the team. She can provide excellent support to the entire team through her skills and her Noble Phantasm, which can charge the entire party's NP gauge. So whenever Da Vinci Lily is Noble Phantasming, your entire party is going to be receiving extra NP charge, which makes her perfect for supporting other farming servants. So she's basically a top tier farmer who also enables other farmers. So if farming is your thing, then Da Vinci Lily is certainly someone to look into. And she can be especially useful if you're lacking a good NP battery servant like Waver or Scotty. However, you should keep in mind that her NP damage is a bit on the low side, so don't expect her to take out too many heavy waves. And her playstyle is heavily one-dimensional. She is just built for farming. Speaking of NP batteries, rounding off our top 5, we have Reynes, who will be dropping with the Case Files collaboration event in April. Reynes is basically Waver 2.0. She can charge an ally's NP gauge by 50%, and she can even charge the entire party's NP gauge by 10%, which makes her a top tier pick for any kind of farming setups, especially if you're lacking Waver. But in addition to that, she's also an excellent defensive support, as she has a powerful party-wide defense buff with a damage cut, much like Waver, but she also has a targetable invincibility. And she's an excellent Berserker support because her Noble Phantasm can actually nullify class disadvantage. That means whenever she Noble Phantasms, your entire team is immune to class disadvantage for 3 turns, including Berserkers. This can enable all kinds of crazy combinations and make already tanky Berserkers like Herc even more tanky. However, she doesn't really reach her full potential until after her skill interlude, which is not going to be until 2022. And unfortunately, she's not as universally useful as Waver, as due to her rider class, she can accidentally steal crit stars from your DPS which can hurt their overall damage. However, if you are looking for a support, especially a defensive support or a support who can better enable farming teams, then Rhaenys is your absolute best pick next year. And coming in at number 4, we have Space Ishtar, who's going to be appearing in Saber Wars 2 in October. And again, like with most of the servants on this list, she is one of the best farmers in the game, especially due to her incredible synergy with Castoria. But she also has a very powerful 50% NP battery that can easily enable her to loop and farm multiple enemy waves even before Castoria ever appears. But that isn't what makes Space Ishtar so special. What does make her special is that she has a skill that allows her to change her NP card type. So she can change her Noble Phantasm between Quick, Arts, and Buster on a whim. This incredible versatility means that she can work well with nearly any support, including Merlin, Skadi, Castoria, and Tamamo. You can quite literally slap her in on any team and she can benefit from whatever buffs that they give her. But in addition to being a dream DPS that can benefit from any support, she also has a ton of damage buffs built into her kit. And because she can change her Noble Phantasm to Quick, she can hit very hard, allowing her to clear even the strongest enemy waves without much support. However, because of her Avenger class, she does lack class advantage in nearly every scenario, which can be a bit of a hindrance if you're bringing her into boss fights. But still, if you're definitively looking for someone who is excellent for farming multiple enemy waves, then I would highly suggest rolling for Space Ishtar, who in my opinion is the best farming servant coming out next year. Now, with all the farming servants out of the way, the top 3 consist of some very heavy hitters, starting off with Kama. Kama is going to be releasing in March of next year during the Tokugawa Kaiten event. Kama is a 5-star assassin who has some incredibly high DPS, mostly due to all the strong buffs built into her kit, which allows her to melt most enemies. She also has a 50% NP battery on a single target Noble Phantasm, along with some incredibly good NP gain, which gives her the ability to spam her already incredibly strong Noble Phantasm, especially if you use her in a team with Skadi, who along with Melt and MHX Alter is a top tier boss killer and challenge quest sweeper in Skadi teams. Kama also happens to be one of the very few anti-alter ego servants in the game, since she can give herself class advantage over all alter egos. So in those rare matchups against alter egos, Kama is easily able to stomp them out. I really can't say enough about just how powerful Kama's NP can be, especially in any kind of quick team with Skadi, and it's made even more devastating by just how easily she's able to spam it out. However, Kama does feel a little bit too Skadi reliant if you want to reach her full potential, and she does suffer from being a part of the assassin class, because that damage modifier doesn't do her any favors. And unlike with Melt and MHX Alter, she doesn't have that wide range of class advantage that they benefit from. From one heavy hitter to the other, at number 2 we have Super Orion, who drops with Lost Bout 5 in December of next year. If you haven't heard about him by now, he is a 5-star archer who is widely considered to be the strongest crit DPS in the entire game, bar none. This is thanks in large part to his multiple stackable 100% crit damage buffs, which allow his Buster card crits to hit even harder than most servants' NPs. Super Orion is a one-man army and completely self-sufficient. He can easily and consistently generate his own stars every turn, and he can use those stars to easily fuel his own crits. He also has enough built-in damage buffs and survival in his kit to not really need any help at all. And another big advantage of Super Orion's is that despite having a triple Buster card deck, he can spam out his Noble Phantasm easily because of his insane arts card that can fill up nearly his entire NP gauge if it crits. There really isn't any other servant who comes close to even approaching the amount of crit damage that Super Orion is capable of, and once he gets going, it's nearly impossible to stop him. Just about his only drawback is that he's very dependent on card RNG, so if you're not soloing with him, it can be hard to get him going, especially if you're unlucky with the command card distribution. But if you're someone who loves to solo enemy bosses, or you want a crit DPS, then there is simply no other choice than to go for Super Orion. And finally, the number 1 pick, the best servant of 2021. Who else could it be but Arjuna Alter? He'll be releasing in June of next year for Lost Belt 4. And yeah, Arjuna Alter is pretty much the definitive cheat code in the game. He is an absolute beast when it comes to stomping out challenge quests due to his insanely high DPS and significantly good survival. As a 5-star berserker with a triple buster card deck, Arjuna Alter is already positioned to do some very strong damage, but what really puts him over the top is that he can consistently crit with his buster cards, which is just simply broken on a triple buster deck berserker. He also has a buster resist down that activates before his Noble Phantasm, and it triggers an additional bonus damage effect on his first skill. So his NP is able to melt most enemies, whether they be regular enemy waves or even enemy bosses. And he even has a good NP charge, which can allow him easy and quick access to his Noble Phantasm in case you want to use him for some farming. Normally, a berserker with this much firepower is supposed to be balanced by being very fragile, but despite being a berserker, Arjuna Alter can stick around for a very long time, because he has a very strong 6000 HP heal and a guts built into his skill set, which makes him a consistent threat that is hard for enemies to get rid of. He basically has even more firepower than Raiko, with just enough survivability to rival even someone like Ku Alter. So when it comes to finding a weakness on Arjuna Alter, it's tough to do. But do keep in mind that he is still a berserker at the end of the day, so if you're unlucky and the enemy focus fires him, they can kill him pretty quickly. But without a doubt, Arjuna Alter is going to be your top pick if you're looking for someone with unmatched firepower who's capable of taking down even the most difficult challenge quests. And those are my picks for the top 10 servants of next year. And as always, these are just my opinions. There are just a ton of amazing servants coming out next year. So many so that I could have easily made this a top 15 or even top 20 list. But feel free to give me your own top 10 list in the comments down below. And if this video did help you and you enjoyed it, please do click that like button and subscribe so you can catch all my videos as they come out. I will be releasing a top 10 upcoming banners video for 2021, as well as a top 5 free-to-play servants video, so keep an eye out for those. And if you haven't already, do join the party over on our Discord, follow us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And until next time, I'll see you all in the next top 10 list or servant spotlight. So we're only out. Later.